friends, Mrs. Matway here to demonstrate or model how to create a note card for your highlighted information. So once again, you need a few materials. You're going to need a pen or a pencil to write with. You're going to need a few blank note cards. You will need your thesis statement worksheet with your 2 highlighted, color-coded arguments. And you will also need the 1 article that you have highlighted. You are going to take notes on 1 article at a time. You will not take multiple notes from 7 different articles at the same time. Focus on 1 article at a time. So why don't you pause the video and gather the materials that you will need in order to take appropriate notes. The first step when creating note cards is you need to create a source code. This source code goes in the upper right-hand corner of your note card. So it's very easy to create a source code. You're going to label this first article, because it's the first one that you're taking notes on, number 1. I'm just going to write on the top here, source number 1. This is so that if I do not understand the information on my note card, I can easily get back to my source. So far, so good. So now I'm going to look at my article and see where I have highlighted some information. I can't really see that well. But it says here, the canopy also provides habitat for a rich diversity of species, especially migratory birds. I'm going to circle the keywords that I need to record onto my card, the words that are the most important in that sentence. So I'm going to circle canopy, habitat, and rich diversity species. Okay, and on my note card, I'm going to bullet those words. I'm going to say rainforest canopy, habitat, rich diversity of species. Okay, but here's the thing. I don't really use the word diversity in my everyday language, so I'm going to put that into my own words. And what that means is it means that there's a lot of species. So I'm going to get rid of rich diversity because that's not my own words. And I'm going to put in a lot of different species. I'm going to change it because that's my own words. I don't really say rich diversity of species, but I may say there's a lot of different species. Now, another word that I don't really use is the word canopy. I'm going to change that, and I know that a canopy is like a awning or a covering or a shade. So I'm going to say the rainforest shade from the trees, because that's where it's coming from. So instead of saying rainforest canopy, I changed that into my own words and I said rainforest shade from the trees. So I have my important bulleted facts. I pulled out just the keywords from that sentence. Okay, now I'm going to put my source code on. In the upper right hand corner, I'm going to write source number 1, because this source code on my note card matches the source code on my article. This piece of evidence came from source number 1. Now I highlighted it in yellow, which clearly shows that it's supposed to connect to argument number 1, which is that current methods of coffee growth are destroying animals' habitats. Okay? And I'm going to ask myself, now, does this fact about the rainforest canopy being a habitat for many different species, does that help support the idea that they're destroying animal habitats? Well, it doesn't actually say that they're destroying animal habitats, but it's telling me that there's a lot of animals that live in this habitat. And that's kind of an important fact for my viewer to understand. So I'm going to say it works really well for argument number 1, which is about habitat. And so I wrote in the upper left-hand corner, argument number 1, habitat. So I know by looking at this note card, my information that I gathered from the source, the keywords, the source that it came from, source number 1, that matches the source code on my article, and also what argument it best supports. So let's try one more example. In my source, it says, as rainforests disappear at the rate of 40 million acres a year, shaded coffee farms play an increasingly critical role in preserving tropical habitat. So the first thing I'm going to do is circle some important keywords that I need to pull out of there. You know, as, not really an important keyword. So I'm going to say disappear, because I'm not going to circle rainforest because I already know I'm talking about the rainforest. Disappear, I'm going to say 40 million acres of year. And then it says shaded coffee farms play an increasingly critical role in preserving tropical habitat. But I actually already know that fact because that's in my thesis statement. That's what my thesis statement's all about, is how coffee farms need to take more of a role in preserving the habitat. So I'm actually going to ignore that part that I highlighted because I don't need to write it on my note card. So I'm going to write down that the words disappear on my note card and the words 40 million acres a year. All right. Now I might get confused later and think that the animals are disappearing at 40 million acres a year. So I'm going to decide right now that, yeah, I want to put the word rainforest as a keyword on this note card because I want to make sure that I know later that I was talking about how the rainforests disappear at 40 million acres a year. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask myself, would I use this language in everyday life? Yeah, I would use the word rainforest. I use the word disappear. 40 million acres a year. Yeah, that's pretty common language that I would use every day. So I'm not going to make any changes to the vocabulary. So that's all set. Now I have to identify the source that it came from, and this is still source number 1. So I'm going to write it down in the upper right-hand corner because it matches with my source code on my article. And then I'm going to ask myself, which argument does it best fit with? Okay? Does this help explain how it is destroying animals' habitats, or does this help explain how it contributes to global warming? Well, it kind of works for both, but I can't write arguments 1 and argument 2 on it. So I think it'll best fit when I'm talking about animals' habitats, because if the acres are disappearing so quickly, then more and more animals are going to be destroyed, and it actually talks about that later. So I'm going to write down argument, I'm going to use this with argument number 1, habitat. Here is my finished note card. So even though you've gone through and you highlighted and you think everything is all set, taking notes actually requires a lot more thinking than just writing down some information. You have to be able to pull out the important keywords from the sentence or sentences that you're taking notes on. You have to put it into your language, vocabulary that you would use on a day-to-day basis. And then you have to then ask yourself, okay, does it really fit with this argument? Am I putting it in with the right argument? Does this really work? I'm not quite sure. You have to think about it. And once you've made all those decisions and you've done all these tasks, then you will have a very good note card that you will be able to use later when you write and create your video. Good luck.